Thank you for tuning in to Spirit of Harmony. I'm your host, John Morton, and welcome to the first episode of what I'm hoping will be a very fruitful podcast. If you're looking for a program in which everyday people come together to discuss the impact that music has had on their lives, this is the program for you. My goal with this podcast is to bring in people that I've known over the course of my life and give them the opportunity to sit down and really just convey the extent to which music has played an impactful role in their lives. I'm hoping that we can span many demographics and genres in this podcast. My goal is to have each guest bring in a song that has had a particularly profound impact on their life, and using a questionnaire that I've prepared, break it down so that each of us can acquire a greater appreciation for it. With this being the first episode, I thought I'd utilize it as an opportunity to introduce myself to you, the audience, tell you a little bit about myself and my background and my musical experiences before diving into a discussion of one of my all-time favorite songs. As far as the title of the podcast, Spirit of Harmony, goes, the inspiration for that came from a lecture I recently attended by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson in my hometown of Durham, North Carolina. As part of the experience, members of the audience got to submit questions for him to answer, and towards the end of the show, after he had given his lecture, a Q&A session with one of his colleagues took place. And after Jordan's colleague took the time to ask a couple of questions pertaining to the lecture that he had just given us, there was only time to answer one audience question, but it was the one that I really wanted him to answer going into the show. The question itself was, do you think our emotional connection to music is something that we have discovered or created? Jordan answered the question by saying that he believed it was discovered. He talked about going to see the Ramones in concert back in the 70s or 80s and seeing this band play this 1,500-seat theater with a stadium-sized speaker set up, and watching the people around him just all surrender to what he described as the spirit of harmony, all of them in unison dancing to this music, these three-chord songs, and all these people of different backgrounds being brought together. In spite of their differences, the music was this powerful unifying entity. Now I'll tell you just a little bit about myself. I grew up in a household in which my parents played a lot of oldies music, specifically from the 70s and 80s on a regular basis. So I became acquainted with artists like Elton John, and Billy Joel, the Eagles, and Lionel Richie very early on. For much of my youth, music didn't play a huge role in my life, really. It was something that served predominantly as background noise. It wasn't really until I started to venture towards adolescence that I started to pay more attention to it. Elton John was an artist who helped me begin to understand the power that music held, the range of thoughts, perspectives, and emotions that an artist could use with this medium to convey their perspective on the world. It certainly helped that Elton had such a strong ear for melody that he was able to grab the listener's attention rather easily. The album of his that prompted me to pay more attention to him wasn't even an album from his classic era of the 70s. It was a more recent work of his. It was an album that came out in 2006 when I was 11 years old. It was called The Captain and the Kid. It was actually the sequel to an album that Elton had put out in the 70s heyday called Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy. The album Captain Fantastic dealt with the early years of Elton's musical partnership with his longtime songwriting partner, Bernie Taupin. The album specifically touched on the years 1967 to 1970 as they started working together and struggled to get their foot in the door within the music industry. On the other hand, 2006's Captain and the Kid focused on everything that they had done from 1970 to the present day, and dealing with becoming massively successful and dealing with all of the professional and personal struggles that went with that. Something about the way Elton was able to take Bernie's lyrics, some of which could be very detail-oriented, whereas others could be more metaphorical, and create these earworms out of them, really struck my attention. Being 11 years old, I couldn't fully understand what they were talking about, and yet I couldn't resist listening and singing along to them. And then, as I went into my teens, I started to dig into Elton's catalog a little bit more. I listened to the classic albums from the 70s, but also ventured into his work from the 80s and 90s and 2000s. And many people will argue that Elton's best work was done in the 70s, but I believe they continue to create great work well beyond that. Bernie has even argued that a lot of their best work was from the post-70s era, so make of that what you will. Elton was the first concert I ever went to when I was 13 years old. I actually saw him twice when I was 13 years old. The first time it was just him with his band, and then the second time it was with his American counterpart, Mr. Billy Joel. About a month after that latter concert, my parents bought me my first keyboard, and I started learning to play. I learned predominantly by ear. Well, as best as one can by learning by ear. It was more so my versions of some of their songs. As a result of me learning by ear and coming up with said versions of those songs, my ways of playing them have evolved over time and are hopefully more accurate to how they were actually recorded. And as I got into high school, I became involved in the band program. I played auxiliary percussion. I was involved in the percussion ensemble as well as the marching and jazz ensembles. On and off over the course of my high school career. I bounced around quite a bit. But really it was through the band program that I found my niche socially. I was very shy at that age. I certainly wasn't cool or popular by the high school hierarchy standards, but it was within the band program that I found my team, my family, my unit, and made some of my best high school memories. We all shared this love of music, and the fact that we were able to play and kind of goof around with each other using our talents. It made us stand out. It made us cool in our own right. It didn't matter if we were low on the totem pole socially. We had each other, and that was all that counted. It was us against the world. And as I've gotten older, my love of music has only grown. I continue to seek out new artists, new music, and I hope that I continue to do that as my life continues. So I hope that this podcast is an opportunity for me to continue on that mission. With all that in mind, I want to go ahead and segue into discussing our first song on the podcast. As I may have implied, it is an Elton John song, one of my favorite songs of his, and what many fans consider one of his best album tracks or deep cuts, depending on which phrase you prefer. The song is Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatter's. Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatter's was written in the same manner as many an Elton John track, with Elton's songwriting partner Bernie Taupin penning the lyrics for Elton to set to music. Bernie composed the lyric during the duo's first trip to New York City during Elton's first major U.S. tour. As Bernie lay in his hotel room one evening, he heard a gunshot go off near the window to his room. This experience shaped the way Bernie initially looked at the city and its residents, certainly defying any preconceptions he may have had going into his visit. The opening lyrics present this change in understanding as a shift from innocence to experience. And now I know, Spanish Harlem are not just pretty words to say. I thought I knew, but now I know that rose trees never grow in New York City. Until you've seen this trash can dream come true, you stand at the edge while people run you through. And I thank the Lord there are people out there like you. The people of New York are presented as perhaps lacking a moral compass, a sense of good and evil. Bernie uses the contrast between day and night to exemplify this. While Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatter's, sons of bankers, sons of lawyers, turn around and say good morning to the night, for unless they see the sky, but they can't, and that is why they know not if it's dark outside or light. The second half of the lyrics, however, suggests that with a further examination, more time to fully immerse oneself in the ambiance of the city, one's perspective can evolve. With such a change in perspective, one can leave their own distinct mark on their surroundings and change it for the better. This Broadway's got a lot of songs to sing, and if I knew the tunes, I might join in. I go my way alone. I grow my own seed shall be sown in New York City. Subway's no way for a good man to go down. Rich man can ride, and the hobo he can drown. And I thank the Lord for the people I have found. The sparse arrangement of the song, comprising of Elton's piano and vocals, Dee Murray's bass guitar, and Davy Johnston's mandolin, allow the listener to zero in on Bernie's lyric and truly reflect on the ideas laid out for us. Elton's vocals are the aspect of the recording I want to highlight. In his prime, Elton was one of the best vocalists out there. It's partially why I won't go see an Elton tribute band, because I've never heard any act in that field that comes close to replicating the versatility of his voice. I've seen a number of Beatles tribute bands excel in this feat, but I've yet to find anyone who could truly do Elton justice. Back to Mona Lisa's. Elton was starting to come into his own vocally, and musically. This was the point in his career when he began to segue from the Americana tributes that shaped his earlier albums, such as the Elton John album and Tumbleweed Connection, and into a more straightforward pop sound. I think Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters, and the Honky Chateau album as a whole, present Elton at a nice midpoint between these two worlds, and demonstrate a growth from innocence to experience of his own that perfectly aligns with Bernie's reflection in the song. I first heard Mona Lisa's when I was 12 years old and just starting to get into Elton's music. I saw a live performance of the song on a DVD called Elton 60, which documented a concert Elton gave at Madison Square Garden in New York on his 60th birthday in March of 2007, also his 60th performance at that venue. The performance of Mona Lisa was actually the first live performance of the song ever, which took place during a show at the Royal Festival Hall in February of 1972, which saw Elton premiere a majority of the material from Honky Chateau in concert, most notably his classic single Rocket Man. I quickly realized this was a track that stood out from the hits of Elton's that I'd heard growing up. The emphasis on lyricism, thanks to the bare-bones arrangement, only confirmed what I had come to suspect as I had listened to The Captain and the Kid a year earlier. There was more range and depth to Elton's catalog waiting for me to uncover. Mona Lisa's is a song that I've come to love more and more as I've gotten older, and his message is one that resonates in both my personal and professional lives. I think it serves as an excellent gateway into the inner sanctums of Elton's catalog. For someone who loves the hits and wants to dig deeper, this track is an excellent launching pad. The biggest takeaway thematically I think the listener gets from Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters is that the potential for redemption lies in everything and everyone. Something that is on the surface bleak or incapable of being fixed can become a source of pride and progress when you approach it from a different angle and take the time to uncover the good that lies within. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you've never listened to Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters, I'm going to post a link to the song in the description to this video, so make sure to check that out. Also, feel free to comment on the video what your favorite Elton John song is. Also, be sure to subscribe in order to be notified of when future episodes arrive. As mentioned, I'm hoping for future episodes to see me have a chance to sit down with people in my life and let them talk about their favorite songs in a manner similar to what I've done today. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you in the next episode.